Hey guys, welcome back to the Honestly Jess show. I am your host, Jess. Hopefully, you've been having a great week thus far. And as you can see, once again, I am not alone on the show today. I have my friend from New Jersey who we've never actually met in real life, but the Lord has kept us connected, Miss Manney Yeboah, who is here to talk to us today about her faith, content creation, and a ton of other amazing creative pursuits that she has. So, Manny, can you give us a synopsis of who you are, what you do?
Yes. First of all, Jess, thank you so much for having me on the show. As Jess said, we met years ago online and we've been connected ever since. I have so much respect for Jess and everything that she's doing. And I love the fact that she stands on her faith
Thank
and has
you.
been unwavering in her faith since I met her. So I trust her and I'm really, really happy to be on her platform to kind of share a little bit about my story. So for me, my name is Manny, and I am a content creator, a wedding and event content creator. Now, I've had a lot of different creative pursuits over the last, I would say, decade or so.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that every single experience has brought me to where I am now. I think this is the first time in a really long time that I feel like I am right where I need to be, career wise. And I know that where I am now is going to lead me to where the Lord ultimately wants me to be. So I am really, really grateful for that. And yeah, that is who I am. Oh, I live in Newark, New Jersey. I am a Jersey girl to the bone. I love being from Newark. I love being from New Jersey. And my family is originally from Ghana, which is in West Africa. But I was born in Germany. So much like my upbringing, I've, taken a lot of detours. There's a lot of different places that are close to my heart and make me who I am. That's actually so interesting how that directly correlates with who I am and my journey. And yeah.
And so, as you were talking about, like, kind of your upbringing, where you are, and all those things, that it really, I think, is in part what connected us was because somewhere along the lines, and I really feel like it was before all of the stuff with 2020, like,
Mhm.
your content was just really cool to me too, because you live in a world that I don't understand, like, and not in a it's a bad don't understand way, but I've just never had the privilege of being in like a church that you go to. Like I saw the videos and
Mhm.
stuff on your stories of like Palm Sunday for you guys, and like the
Right, right.
charismatic world is just like not a world that I live in. So
Mhm.
how did you get there? Like what was the process that the Lord brought you through to bring you there?
Yeah, so I grew up my whole life, going to church, and I remember accepting Jesus as my Lord and Savior as a kid and being baptized my sophomore year of high school. So I remember all of those things, and my parents. One of the things that they wanted to instill in my younger sisters and I's life is that Jesus is the center of our world. It's like this is who we
Mhm.
worship. So even when I moved to America with my parents, my two younger sisters weren't born yet. But I do remember my parents specifically wanting me to go to a school where I would be constantly reminded of who the Lord is and his presence in my life.
Mm.
So my parents did not want me to go to public school. But then as immigrants too, we didn't have a bunch of money to go to like a well-off Christian school. So what
Sure.
ended up happening was that my parents discovered, because at that time going to Catholic school was a lot more popular than it is now. I think now a
Yeah.
lot of Catholic schools, well, at least where I'm based in, like in the New Jersey, New York area, a lot of Catholic schools
Mhm.
have closed down because of the charter school, takeover that's happening, where you can still go to a school where you're wearing a uniform. I mean, you don't have to pay tuition. You
Mhm.
can get the quote unquote same education. Um,
Yeah.
so when we first came, that's where we started. I started going to a Catholic school. I went to um, Blessed Sacrament School for all of my elementary school life. And then I transferred over to St. Leo's Interparochial School in another city in Jersey. So I just went from one Catholic school to the other. Then my high school was a Catholic school. Even my college was,
Mhm.
technically a Catholic school. So it was something that I
Oh
was
wow.
always kind of into. Now, granted, we're not Catholic. We're not Catholic, like not even a little
Mhm.
bit. So,
Yeah.
but my parents, obviously, they're no charismatic, elementary schools. Well, not that I know of. Um,
Right. Me neither.
or yeah, so I don't think there are any schools like that. So my parents just wanted us to um go with something that would keep us in the faith. That was their most important, like that was their number one priority. And I believe that as we got older, my parents kind of observed how, kids that went to public school sometimes would turn out. And I'm
Mhm.
I'm not afraid to admit that, I live in Newark, New Jersey, and some might even consider it like, an impoverished city, crime, all of these other things, even though that's drastically changed over the years, due to
Mhm.
gentrification and all these other things. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. But
Yeah.
at the at the time, my parents just really didn't like what they were seeing when it came to education. And much like a lot of other immigrants, education is really, really like a vital part of, I guess, a person's, day-to-day life, because it's the
Mhm.
one thing that can kind of pull us out of whatever struggle that we're going through. So that's kind of the mindset that a lot of immigrants have. So I went to those schools and everything. And while going to school, we were still going to church every single week. I held a lot of roles at my childhood church. At one point, I was like kind of like the liaison for the youth ministry. I was
Yeah.
helping out with the children's ministry in the Sunday school. I was teaching, and I also went to dance school for most of my life. So I was teaching ballet
Mhm.
classes to some, friends at church, some of the younger kids at church. So we would actually minister those ballet pieces at church, even with like our old recital costumes. I don't know what I was thinking,
Yeah.
but I was very, very determined to make sure that this was something that I could, I guess, open up my childhood community to.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then sometimes I would organize game nights for the youth, and I was doing all of these different things in church, because I really did believe that there was a way that we can still maintain our faith, but also still, have fun and still do the things that we enjoy. And
Yeah.
then um, so then I think between end of high school and college was when I started to kind of stray away from the Lord, or just the things of God in general. So
Sure.
was in school, and this was also when I got to college. This is when I learned a lot about race relations in America and things of that nature. Being
Mhm.
Ghanaian, and in Ghana there was never like a civil rights movement or anything. um
Yeah.
from what I learned from my parents, the only thing that the country had really fought for at that time was its independence, and that was like way before my parents were born, way before I was born. So
Yeah.
Ghana in itself has been its own entity for, well, next year will make it 70 years. So,
Mhm.
the civil rights movement and just the history of racism was not something that my parents were really aware of. I don't think it was
Yeah.
something that my parents, I don't want to say didn't care about, but it wasn't a priority for them. So,
Sure.
when I went to college and I started to get exposed to all of these different things, and it also had to happen to be around the same time as years went on, where Trayvon Martin was killed, where Donald Trump became the president. So I've been
Mhm.
around a lot of different opinions on those two topics, and a lot of
Yeah.
polarizing views on where we should be as a country and things of that nature. So I was exposed to a lot, things that were totally different from what I was used to. And before I went to college, the only exposure that I had to people who looked different than me was in ballet school. But even that, like, all the white people I knew in ballet school were also around a lot of people of color. So it didn't feel like, you were outside. Like, I didn't feel like I was an outsider, but
Right.
I really felt that when I went to college. Um,
Mm.
So, and in the midst of just getting into revolutionary, movements and acts and just being so ingrained, into that, that's kind of where all my focus really fell into. And I think that my faith was something that I kind of questioned at the time because I'm just like, what is this? What is going on? I don't understand this. Like, why can't we just all live in harmony? Like, why is my
Hmm.
race or my ethnicity constantly being questioned? Why are people assuming that they know
Yeah.
me because of the color of my skin? It was a really, really difficult
True.
time for me. Yeah, it was such a difficult time. I feel like I think this is probably the one time in my life where I'm just like, I don't know who I am. So it was really, really
Mm.
hard. And then also being like, I'm Ghanaian, I'm not like African American or black. I guess some people would say, well, I'm black. I mean, obviously, I'm black,
Right.
but being from Ghana it's definitely different experience than someone who is originally from like an African American person from Alabama or something. Two totally different,
Sure.
experiences, even though there are a lot of similarities. So that was something I had to grapple with too. So for me,
Hmm.
walking into a space where I guess I didn't understand why my color was something that mattered so much. And it wasn't until I started taking classes and reading books and, really getting ingrained to this, I was like, okay, this is what's happening. So in the midst of that is when I think I started to stray away
Hmm.
from the Lord. So that whole period of my life, even though there were moments that I did, pray and go back to my word, because even in college, people still knew that, oh well, if I need to pray about something, I'm gonna go to Manney. Like, and it was something I spoke about, but I wasn't as
Hmm.
devout, I would say, as I was until I graduated. So when I returned back to New Jersey, because I went to college in Vermont,
Sure.
Colchester, Vermont, which is a totally different environment from Newark, New Jersey. I'm from an inner city, and in Vermont, it's
Yeah.
different. There are farms up there, like it's just so different.
Yeah.
So when I returned
Polar
back,
opposites.
literally like, and it's so funny because I find myself in situations like that a lot, where it's like I'm in these environments that aren't connected to me at all, or connected to my identity, but I still find a way to kind of like thrive there and just live and survive. And I feel like I also learned that from
Hmm.
my parents in a really interesting way, because they've had to do the same thing. They went from growing up in Ghana, West Africa, and then moving to Germany, which we already know the history of Germany is just complete opposite of what
Yeah.
we're used to. They had to even learn the language. It was a lot. So I could really
Hmm.
relate to that as well. So when I returned back from college, my youngest sister got sick. She got really, really, really sick. And even when I
Mm.
returned back from college, I think for about a year and some change, I wasn't going to church. Like my parents, I moved back home. So my parents were like, "Oh, we're going to church today. Like, are
Hmm.
you coming?" I said, "No, I'm good. Like, I'm okay." Um, and I just remember just being really unfulfilled in that time, in my life. I think I was very, very depressed, and really, really overwhelmed
Mm.
with, all of what was happening in my life, and just not really knowing where I wanted to go next. I went to college with the thought that I would graduate and then eventually become a geriatric doctor. And that just was so not in
Wow.
the cards. That everything changed. So I think once I
Uh-huh.
started taking certain classes in college, I'm like, I don't want to be a doctor. Like, I don't think that is what my purpose is. I know that that is what I've told myself my whole life, that I wanted to be a doctor, but that's not where, I want to land. And that's not where I see myself landing, especially as someone who is, I think, like inherently, like I am a creative. Like, I love arts. I love, music performance, like dancing. I just love all the things that have to do with creativity is kind of where my I guess sphere of like passion and focus has been in. And that has been probably the one thing that's been consistent throughout my whole life, despite all the careers I've had, despite all the various
Mm.
experiences that I've had, the different places that I've been. One thing that has stood the same is the fact that I just love the arts. Like I love creativity. That's my that is my, I guess, my metron. Like that's where I want to be. So when I think I started taking a poetry class. And I took a poetry class with this Irish man, Greg Delanty. Love him so much. And we started exploring poetry, and
Mhm.
then he kind of talks about how, like, because I think I shared my experience of like always being the only black person in the classroom, and he said that, in Ireland, because there's so few black people, there isn't even a word in their language for someone who's black. So they kind of come up with other words to describe a
Wow.
black person, like maybe something that's close to the color blue or something like that, because they just don't see it often. So I think meeting him and taking his class, and then meeting another woman, her name was Lori Smith. I took an African American anthology class with her, and it was the same thing where she is actually originally from New Jersey, but then when her family noticed that a lot of the black people from down south were moving up north after slavery was abolished, her family and all the people she knew in Jersey, they did kind of the white flight and they moved, away. But anyways, where was I
Mhm.
going with that? Yeah, so anyways, when I took those classes, I realized that I can't be a doctor anymore. So when I came back, I told my parents that, I'm not taking the
Mm.
MCAT. I don't want to be, a doctor anymore. That's not where we're going. But I didn't know how to tell them that, maybe I want to do something in the social justice realm, or something that pretty much advocates for people of color. And being in Newark, it's a totally different experience, right? There's
Yeah.
not that many, white people here. So I didn't really, there was no space for me to be like
Mhm.
leading marches like I was in college, or calling for, rallying meetings or anything like that. It's a totally different experience. And there are other points of struggle, I guess, that needed to be addressed here that were different from what I experienced in Vermont. So I think that was the beginning of just me being I was just in a very confused state, because I'm like, okay, well, I know I don't want to be a
Mm.
doctor. And I know I'm back around more people that look like me, but I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. So that was where the beginning of this search for, who I was or what I wanted to do started. So then after that, I remember I got a job at a nonprofit, and I was working with young people. And I love working with young people. Like, that's another thing that I enjoy too, just connecting with younger people, and just helping them get to where they want to be, even if it feels like their dreams are like they can't, how do I say it, grasp them at all. A lot of people from Newark grow up thinking that they can
Yeah.
never make it out, but I loved working with you
Mm.
just to let them know that, like, no, you can't get out of here. Like, this is not your end all be
Yeah.
all. So yeah, and then I got the job at a nonprofit. It was in New York, and I did that for about 2 years, and then I became a teacher. I got the amazing opportunity to be a teacher right here in Newark, just a few minutes away from my house, at a high school. And that was and actually before that, sorry to be jumping the timeline. So
Oh, you're
before all of
good.
that happened, I was still in the midst of trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And as I mentioned before, my sister got really, really sick. And I think my sister getting sick was kind of the answer to my prayers at that time. And I know that sounds crazy, but her getting sick is what pushed my entire family to kind of come back to the center of everything, which is Christ. So we all rededicated our
Mm.
lives to Christ at that time. And we took our prayer life more seriously. Um, we took our word life more seriously. We were doing prayer nights together. Like, my family would come together and we would pray. And in the midst of all
Yeah.
this, because I didn't want to go back to my childhood church, when I rededicated my life to Christ, I said that I need to find a community where I know that I will be fed spiritually. And I know that I can grow spiritually as well. And it wasn't that my childhood church wasn't doing that.
Mhm.
I just thought that it was time. Like, I do feel like the Lord was calling me to somewhere that was gonna force me to just get in there. Like, I need to pray more. I need to fast more. I
Yeah.
need to be in my word. Like, I need to be in an environment that thoroughly fostered that. And at the time, I didn't think that I was going to be able to get that from my childhood church. So that's why I had made the decision to continue
Mhm.
looking. And even in the midst of in the midst of that search is where things started to, like, get better. Like, funny enough, the event that my church has had this weekend, it's called Prayer Fest. That was the event that I went to. I think it was in 2019. That actually inspired me to pray and fast for real, like for like I guess maybe it was probably like the second time in my life at that point. And after a week
Yeah.
of fasting, I did a dry fast as led by the Lord. And I got a new job. Like I remember being really miserable at that time. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is the first time that I have willingly done a fast dry. I was only drinking water it was just for a few days, like a week or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in my word. I was in prayer. I was like, no one had to tell me to do anything. Like, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I had to do as led by the Lord. And I literally ended up getting the job. Like, they hired me with no real credentials. Like, got hired on the spot. And I was like, okay, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is wild. I've never, experienced anything like that. And prior to that, when my sister got sick, interestingly enough, she was like, oh, well, I think she had come back from Ghana and she had so many crazy complications and she almost died. And I remember when she was in my room and she said, I want to go to church. And I remember at that time, and this is also still around the time where I had straight away, and I'm like, church? What do you like? What are we gonna get from there? God have mercy on me.
Mm-hmm.
I was so like, I don't understand what that means, but we went to the church and we went
Mm-hmm.
to, and it was a charismatic church. It was a church we found across the street from the grocery store here in Newark, a few minutes away. We just had no idea what to do, but that was where the Lord, led us. And there was a man of God there, and he prayed and everything. And I think before we got into like the deliverance portion of everything, he looked at me. He was like, "Do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and personal Savior?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Like, can you help her?" Like, and my brain was just like, "I just need my sister to be okay. Like, I don't care about anything else. I just need my sister to be okay." And when that happened was when I started looking for my
Yeah.
and I found KFT on Instagram actually. So when I found KFT on Instagram, they were doing
Oh,
a
cool.
marriage and destiny fast, and I was like, marriage. I mean, I was like, yeah, I want to get married, but I hope this is not going to be about me just praying about a man for 21 days. And it really wasn't. It was a
Right.
fast that
Mm-hmm.
um, really pushed us and gingered us in our faith to call on God for all the various, parts of our life, whether that be financially, education wise, family wise, in any literally in any area. We prayed about every single thing. And that is what really got me, I'm like, okay, I think at the time I
Mm-hmm.
was 23, 24. I'm like, okay, I'm 24 and I'm praying about my future children. Never been in a situation like that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
am 24 and um I'm praying against any, sickness that, the enemy has put ahead of me or anything like that. Like, we were praying about everything. Like, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, this is interesting. Like, I've never been in an environment where, um, I am praying about every single, different terrain in my life. Growing up, a lot of the prayers were centered around finances and it was centered around, um how do I say it? I mean, just salvation in general, but I
Mm-hmm.
the only sermons I remember from when I was a child were about money, so I think um
Wow.
being in like all the sermons it was about money. But I do remember, of course, learning about some of the staple things like Psalm 23, John 3:16, all of these different things. Oh, can you recite all the books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy? I can do all of that. Like, that's what I
Mm-hmm.
remember. So being at KFT kind of forced me to like look like deeper, get to, the spiritual root of things, like understanding that um some of the things that I experienced in my childhood were, orchestrated by the enemy, not in like a spooky fear mongering, way, but as children, the enemy tries to snatch us up really early. He wants us to see ourselves in a certain way. And there were certain
Yeah.
experiences that I had that, I didn't realize that I was holding on to as an adult. And I guess after, rededicating my life to Christ and really getting into the word, I realized that, oh wow, like this is what the enemy was trying to do. Like, he was trying to take me out. Like, he wanted me to see myself as less than so that I
Mm.
wouldn't really grow in my full potential that the Lord wanted me, to be in. He wanted me to be in certain situations to kind of like mute me or mute my voice, mute my personality. So those are all the different things that, kind of came about. So when I joined KFT, prior to that, like I said, I was really depressed. I was very confused on who I was in terms of my identity. And I was in survival mode constantly. But coming to KFT forced me to, really lean on God, His Word, um, and His word for my life. I can say, like, yeah. So that was a really long-winded answer. I'm sorry, but yeah, yeah,
No, I love it. Listen, that's what we want. That's what we want on the show. Which like at the same time though, like who cares if it was long-winded because you kind of touched on and I can see the thread starting to form of all of the different things that like the Lord has been placing in your life and has allowed to be present. Like,
right.
yes, there are these times where like it's clear that the enemy is definitely out to do what it says in John 10:10, steal,
Mhm.
kill, and destroy.
Right.
But the back half of that verse that like so many people I know forget to finish the verse. It's like, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Like
Right.
the abundance was literally always on the other side of the threshold.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
it's like you walked over the threshold like several times and like to the point where like now you're at KFT and when you walked over it then, I know it hasn't necessarily been like, easy going since then, but the difference in how the foundation that you had from your family, even from being in
Mhm.
Catholic school and like
Right.
just being around the word and the word still being present has like so clearly helped also just like foster all of the
Yeah.
passions that you have because yeah, like you've been a teacher, you've been in charge of social media, you have been a praise dancer, like you have all of these
Yes.
wildly creative things that just like saturate your life, which is so cool. And
Yeah.
so it's crazy to me because I don't think I knew that you had considered being a doctor before doing
Yeah.
anything else because like in my mind I'm like no, Manny was just like built to do creative things. That is like 100%. Like I see you and I'm like, yeah, that girl's going to do something creative, entrepreneurial, like let's freaking go.
Yeah.
Um so do you like what do you feel like has been such like a big thing at KFT cuz the way I kind of phrased the question was like your whole congregation, like there is just something within y'all that to me from the outside looking in seems built on let's build something like, and
Hmm.
so do you feel like that's something that Apostle and First Lady, like they foster within y'all intentionally? Is it just kind of like this is a core value because we wanted to build community, and so entrepreneurship kind of flows out of that because
Hmm.
it's another building block?
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think that what like my pastors really care about us fulfilling what the Lord wants us to do. So, and if that
Mm,
looks like, creating, your own thing or like being an entrepreneur, then that's, that's fine. Like that is how they have fostered that. And I think that they also, well, like I think at KFT, the mission we have is to manifest the kingdom of God here on earth. And they have
mhm.
also, you know allowed us to see that manifesting the kingdom of God here on earth looks different for all of us, right? Maybe you're not going
Yeah.
to be the person that is holding the mic preaching the sermon, or maybe you're not going to be the person that is playing the piano during, worship. But with you being a teacher, you are catering to precious souls, in your hands, souls that um can come to Christ one day or maybe not, or but you are the
Hmm.
representation of Christ and his kingdom right there, in the classroom. The same goes for you
Yeah.
being, a bank teller, or the same goes for you being maybe an Amazon Prime delivery person. Like literally, they have always instilled in us that you need to do what God is telling you to do, and he can do that in
Hmm.
any terrain in your life. So I know for them, like, and that's what happened with them. My pastor, Apostle Dominic, he was getting ready to go to the NBA, like, okay, like straight from Fordham University.
Wow.
Yeah, he was getting ready to be probably one of the biggest NBA stars, biggest Ghanaian NBA stars, that the league probably would have ever seen. And but he after he graduated, he ended up working on Wall Street. And then in working on Wall Street, he got the calling from God that, like, oh, you have to lead people. You were called to be, a
Mm.
pastor, an apostle, a shepherd. So he gave all that up just because he heard, the voice of the Lord. And I think that his
Mm.
obedience is exactly what the kingdom, the body of Christ. I think that's exactly what the body of Christ needed. So I always think, like, I always imagine, like, wow, okay, so you went to Fordham Business School, which is like one of the best business schools in the country. You worked on Wall
Mhm.
Street. He knows people currently, like, in the league. Like, he's familiar with some of these NBA players. Like, he knows them. He was in line to be this, amazing NBA star, but the Lord called him to, this particular calling. And I always found that so fascinating because then in that sense, he had to really take a look at everything that was going on and figure, okay, so all right, Lord, so what do I need to do next? How do I,
Mhm.
fully get into this? He was in his word, he was praying. He went through a really, really tough season where he didn't have the funds to do much of anything. He always tells us, like, I was working at Macy's. I was working at Macy's. Like, I had to do whatever I could do in order to survive. And his faith never wavered. He never ever wavered.
Mm.
Then you have, my first lady, prophetess Leslie. I'll say, like, she she is, first of all, amazing, in line to probably be on TV somewhere, like being a huge superstar.
Yes.
She has a really, really powerful background in mental health, psychology.
Mm.
Like, she, was already built to assist others. And she was
Mm.
always the one, I think in any room that she was in, she always stood out, because the light of Christ was just on her life from the beginning. But she also had some experiences
Mhm.
in her life that kind of shifted things for her, like her father passing away when she was really young, being one of
Mm.
seven children and trying to, like, lead, help lead them, help her mom and everything like that. And
Yeah.
she's gorgeous. So literally, she could have
She's
done
stunning.
anything. Literally, she could have been
Mhm.
on someone's TV screen right now. Literally, like, she could have done
Yes.
anything that she wanted to do. But she heard the calling over her life when she was very, very young. She always tells the story, like, she gave her life to Christ at 10. She was always involved in the things of God, and she always had the presence of God closely with her. And even when
Mm.
people were out there doing things that they weren't supposed to do, she was not involved. Like, she always was someone that was so, 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 so um deep in her faith, and someone who truly, truly loved God. So, and then she eventually started to be guided and be taught by her spiritual parents. And yeah, she is now the force that she is now. And with both of them, they are very involved in business, real estate, and all of these different business endeavors. So, they know what the Lord has brought them out of, and then they also
Mm.
are fully aware of what the Lord can do with what they have, and what the Lord can lead them into in order to be secure financially, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. So they
Mhm.
know exactly what it is to really build something, from scratch, whether it be in ministry or whether in regular day-to-day life. They know what it's like to build something from the ground up. So I think, and even with the way that the church came about, it started in their living room. Again, they heard the voice of the
Mhm.
Lord, started in their living room, and now, we've moved into this huge building in Darien, Connecticut, where it, like, over 1,000 people could be in one service. Like, that's how big it's grown.
Yeah.
And they went from their apartment to a kindergarten classroom in a boys and girls club in Stamford, Connecticut, to a small warehouse, to now, where we are now. So I think
Mhm.
that for my leaders, I really admire and value them so much, because we've even watched like a portion of them building what they have now. And
Yeah.
we watched how throughout that process that they've depended on God, and they've had other jobs. They've worked in between and all these other things, but one thing that never, ever, ever wavered was their obedience to the voice of God, and also the faith that they knew that the Lord had greater for them, and they knew that the Lord
Mm.
had a deeper purpose for them. So to watch them go from where they were, um just young people who are, so in love with God and eager to really spread the message of the gospel to the four corners of the earth, to seeing them now do exactly that at this scale, because now we have three branches. We have, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, thousands and thousands of members from all over the world. And it's just so amazing to see, what they've been able to do. And I think because they know that the Lord has a purpose for each of us, they always try to have us lean into our gifts as well. So me, for example, being like a content creator, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
right now in this time of my life, I am a content creator, but I think that for me, something that I've always enjoyed doing is telling stories. And something that I've always
Yeah.
enjoyed doing is, showcasing the lives of others. And, I want to know about people. I want to know about what they're going through. I want to just know about these things. And I love to share that. Like, that is what, like, at its core, that's what I love to do. So being able to do that as a content creator right now for weddings and events has been something that's really important. And I remember my first lady, she shouted me out on her podcast. She was like, Manny, you're doing a great job with, Manny got the shot. Like, I'm using
Mm-hmm.
what I have of telling stories and celebrating others as a way to highlight, those specific love stories. And I think when I quit my job as a teacher, I
Yeah.
remember my apostle was like, you sure you want to do that? I was like, yeah, like, the grace is lifted for being in the school. The grace lifted with,
Mm.
teaching the kids. I was no longer in that headspace that I was when I first started working there. So everything had drastically changed. But I didn't know what I wanted. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that wanted to get another job. I didn't know if I wanted to continue being a teacher. And I tried to explain that to my apostle. And at first I could tell he was a little bit worried because he didn't want me to be in this place where, like, obviously that I'm not, doing anything. Because even though they 100% support
Right.
our dreams and our desires, they also want us to always apply wisdom. So yeah, like,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I remember him saying, like, "Oh, you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, no, this apostle, like, no, I can't be here anymore. Like, I can't do it." So, and it's so crazy how it even happened where
Mm-hmm.
I applied to all these jobs, job after job after job application. It just was not working. And I remember slamming my laptop shut and saying, "You know what? I am done with this." And then it was during one of our midnight prayer sessions, and I heard the name Manny got the shot in prayer, and I was like, that's what it's going to be called. Manny got the shot. So in the middle of the night, I started the page and everything, and then that's when I
Mm-hmm.
started getting bookings. That's when people started to book me, and I'm like, oh, this is wild. Like, I didn't expect, and I didn't expect to get this
Yeah.
far, with this. So I appreciate my leaders because they truly believe in all of, not just us, like everyone in general, truly living in their purpose, and living in the
Mm-hmm.
God given calling that they have in any terrain in their life. Because in anything that I feel like, as believers, and anything that we do, we can still pull more souls into the kingdom of God. Whether you're a teacher, a firefighter,
Mm.
someone who has a podcast, like, you can find ways
Yeah.
to grow the kingdom of God in all of those different um areas. So that is something that they always, always, always push for. So really, really grateful for
Yeah.
them.
Hey guys, this is Jess from the editing room. I'm coming on here to say that we're ending this episode a little early. You probably noticed that it cut off, but that's because the content in this episode is just too good to try and give to you all in one go. So we're going to do this episode in two parts. You just finished listening to part one. Part two will go up next week so that you have a chance to really digest the information that we're talking about and sharing. And in the meantime, before the next week's episode comes out, you can still follow Manney in all of the places. That'll be linked in the show notes below, or if you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description box. But yeah, come back next week for part two. And in the meantime, as you're waiting, there are plenty of other episodes to listen to. But yeah, y'all stick around on Instagram, say hello, and until the next episode, y'all be good.